Hi everybody, how are you? Today I'm going to talk a little bit about my work in supercapacitors under dynamic conditions. But firstly, let me introduce myself. Well, my name is Rafael and I am an electrical engineer, and I've been working researching for the past 2 years with energy storage devices. During that time, I've been working together with Professor Hudson to create new materials to be used as supercapacitors. This partnership has earned us some publications in excellent journals in the area of energy storage devices. The last one talks about a new carbon-based material decorated with niobium pentoxide to be used as electrodes for supercapacitors. But here, in today's presentation, in the paper used in today's presentation, we had made a study of the supercapacitor under dynamic conditions, or in other words, under charge and discharge this device. Let's look now at these finds. The last 20 years have witnessed a huge growth of Raman in-situ studies. In-situ may mean Operando studies. To say that the study is done under Operando conditions is the same to say that the study is done charging and discharging a certain device. Such studies become an important tool to identify or measure properties of energy storage devices such as batteries and supercapacitors. Some examples of these two applications are ion insertion, ion intercalation, and ion deintercalation studies is carbon-based materials, as well as to verify doping and de-doping effects. In the case of ionic intercalation, this phenomenon is indicated by the G-band separation in two peaks. One of them is around 1,600 centimeters minus 1, and the other a peak at around 1,578 centimeters minus 1. Knowing that peaks represent adjacent or non-adjacent within layers to the intercalated layer, and by making the radius between these peaks, we can identify the stage of graphite intercalation compound, or in other words, the GIC compound. Like this, other studies have been done to monitor the intrinsic electrochemical processes to the operando conditions of supercapacitors. With this in mind, our group carried out Raman studies under operando conditions on the electrodes already presented in the introduction. We had used the carbon-based materials decorated with niobium in this case. This work concerns the use of these carbon-based electrodes in lithium sulfate aqueous electrolyte, representing the real working process of these electrodes. It was expected to find processes previously described here, such as ionic intercalation, or even to verify the carbon-based material degradation. However, we notice a reversible shift at the D-band position, according to the charge and discharge processes of our supercapacitor. In today's presentation, I will present all the peculiarities and characteristics, as well as discuss possible explanations for such D-band shift. We believe that we have found an innovative possible explanation for this phenomenon. The cell used in this study is called EO cell, and this slide, figure 1, shows all of your individual features. The left side of figure 1 shows the cell coupled inside of Raman spectroscope, and the right side of figure 1 shows inside of the cell. Most part of the cell is made of Teflon PTFE, which supports all the electrodes. A stainless steel cylindrical contact electrode is present on the bottom of the cell, acting as a working electrode electric contact. Next, the carbon-based material decorated with niobium electrode is placed on the electric contact, and a mesoporous membrane was used to separate the work electrode and counter reference electrode. After that, here we put 20 microliters of lithium sulfate electrolyte, and another carbon-based material decorated with niobium with a concentric hole is placed over the separator. The cell body was surrounded by an O-ring sealing to prevent leakage. And finally, a glass window was placed over the ring at the top of the cell, and a stainless steel cell cap was bolted onto the cell body to completely seal and prevent evaporation of the electrolyte. In addition, using a hospital syringe with a small portion of the electrolyte, excess air was removed and some additional electrolyte added. As you can see in figure 1 and figure A, representing an EO cell overview looking inside of the Raman spectroscope, and figure B shows an internal view showing the electrochemical cell composition used in these Operando experiments. Okay, from a practical point of view, electrochemical capacitors are stable and durable, thus it was necessary to confirm this scenario. Therefore, before Raman Operando analysis, 1000 cyclic voltammetry cycles were made with a scan rate of 1000 millivolts per second. It is clearly noted that the CV after these tests, these cycles, exhibited a very good shape that confirms the stability and longevity of cells. Figure 2 shows cyclic voltammetry at 100 millivolts per second at different potential windows as 0 to 0.6, 0.8, 1, 1.2, 1.4, 1.6, and 1.8 volts. After 1000 cycles for stabilization, the voltammogram showed in figure 2 has excellent response and stability. Also, this is a typical voltammogram shape for supercapacitors. In the case of Operando studies, during the acquisition of the Operando Raman spectra, one cyclic voltammetry was performed with a scan rate of 1 millivolts per second. The Raman spectroscopic acquisition time for each spectrum is 6 seconds and 2 accumulations. And each Raman spectrum was acquired within 0.2 volts. This setup is the optimal point between scan rate and acquisition time for a quality Raman spectrum. This slide shows cyclic voltammetry proving the excellent electrochemical behavior of the cell used in the Operando studies. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. Figure 3a shows the spectra obtained during dynamic conditions of the supercapacitor made with carbon-based material decorated with niobium. In this figure, we can see all the peaks corresponding to the niobium material decorating the electrodes, and the peaks referring to carbon. Thus, our analysis will be separated between these two regions. Region 1, which corresponds to the niobium peaks, the region between 150 centimeters minus 1 and 1100 centimeters minus 1, and region 2, which correspond to the carbon peaks, the region between 1200 centimeters minus 1 and 1700 centimeters minus 1. From now on, whenever we refer to region 1 and region 2, we will be referring to that. The Raman spectra were collected during cyclic voltammetry, 1 millivolts per second, within a voltage window of 0 to 1.8 volts, as I showed before. In addition, spectra were taken at steps of 0.2 volts. And figure 3b shows the current during these tests. The purple frame between these graphs shows the applied potential during cyclic voltammetry. As I said, this figure shows the Raman spectra in this left side during dynamic conditions with a voltage window of 1.8 volts, and the central bar shows the voltage variation according to the experiments. And the right side, the current responses during the Operando study. Firstly, it's worth noting that we did not observe the formation of any new bands regardless of region 1 or region 2. Thereby, there is no production of any extra phase in the charge storage mechanism. From each spectrum of region 2, we can note two strong peaks centered at 1508 centimeters minus 1 and the other around 1350 centimeters minus 1. These peaks are so-called G and D bands. According to Winstra and Koenig, two of the most known researchers in the area, the G band happens because of the double degenerate vibrational mode that takes place at the crossing of the ELO and ITO phono branches at the T point in the force Brillouin zone of graphite. In the case of D band, Winstra and Koenig suggested that this band happens because of a totally symmetric vibration mode coming at the K point in the force Brillouin zone of graphite, which generates a loss of translational symmetry by reaching the edges of the crystallite. Okay, second, in the potential range between 0 to 1.8 in the anodic process, the so-called D band suffered a shift in all cases. In a similar way, in the cathodic process, as you can see, the D band shifts in the opposite direction, returning to its initial position. This noticeable change in the D band at whole spectra are shown in figure 3a in the second region. Therefore, this phenomenon may indicate that the charge storage mechanism leads to a D band shift, or, in other words, maybe this phenomenon shows to us a relationship between the charge storage mechanism and the D band shift. Looking at region 1, we can see only a change at 990 centimeters minus 1 band intensity. It's a band corresponding to the sulfate. We understand this indicates that with an increase of applied potential, more sulfate ions are attracted to the carbon-based material decorated with niobium electrode surface. This explains the Count's increase in the Raman spectra. What we talk about here can be seen in figure 4. Have a look to this figure. In the case of niobium peaks in figure 4a, there were no significant difference in the Raman spectra. On the other hand, in figure 4b, the sulfate band at 990 centimeters minus 1 is clearly increasing the intensity. As we said before, The accumulation of the sulfate ion at the carbon-based electrode increases the 100 centimeters minus 1 band intensity. Figure 4c shows the D band shift in region 2. We clearly see the blue shift at D band up to 1.8 volts. And then, in the cathodic process of voltammetry, we can see the red shift of D band. And again, the purple frame in the right corner shows the applied potential during cyclic voltammetry. Okay, let's move on to figure 5. And here we have another important features. Figure 5 presents the D band position, the D band intensity, and 990 band intensity as a function of applied potential. In figure 5a, the reversible shift on the D band position is highlighted. In this figure, in this slide, the D band starts with its position at around 1329 centimeters minus 1 and applied potential with 0 volts and reaches a position of 1335 centimeters minus 1 and applied potential is 1.8 volts. This is the charging process. In the case of discharge process, we see that the D band position goes from 1335 centimeters minus 1 to 1329 centimeters minus 1. In other words, going to initial position. Clearly having a reversible shift in the D band position. Have a look to figure 5b. And here we can note that the D band intensity decreases according to the applied potential. In this case, it's not a reversible process. On the other hand, figure 5c shows that the 990 centimeters minus 1 band behaves similarly but inverted. Here, the 990 centimeters band increases according to the applied potential and does not have a reversible behavior. This corroborates what we said before. The sulfate ion is attracted to the niobium decorating the carbon-based material surface, causing an increase in the 990 centimeters minus 1 band. And then it's decreased the carbon band intensities, since the sulfate ion is covering the carbon-based material electrode surface. Even so, the reasons for this increase and decrease in the intensities are not completely understood by us. Okay, up to now, we have a possible explanation for what happens with the D and 990 band intensities, but we do not have an explanation for the D band shift. Maybe you can ask me, Rafael, why the D band shift? Okay, to answer this question, we need to understand the phenomenon that gives rise to the D band. This phenomenon is called double resonance process. Let's figure out how the double resonance process can explain this phenomenon. Such a process is related to defects or edges in these materials, which are the causes of the double resonance process. As can be seen in this slide, figure 6a, a graphene layer absorbs the incident photon, the blue arrow, with energy represented in the figure A, and creates an electron-hole pair. The electron, in turn, leaves the valence band going to the conduction band and creates a phonon with energy shown in figure A, the solid arrow. After that, the electron is inelastically scattered by the defect, the dashed arrow, and recombines with the hole, giving rise to a photon that exiting the graphene layer with energy represented by the equation showed in this slide. Or, in other words, the red arrow is representing the output photon energy. These simple considerations clearly show that output photon energy directly depends on the phonon vibration energy. This has already been proposed by Baranov, Poxy, and Mathews, and I don't know how can I say the name of these guys in the right way, but I think that is the right way. On this occasion, they show that the D band has shifts according to the frequency change with the incident photon energy. They propose that the modulus of the phonon wave vector associated with the energy of output photon is represented by the equation in this figure. Look to this equation here. Besides that, it's very known that the phonon energy is usually 10 times smaller than the incident photon energy. Thus, we can ignore this term in this equation. Thereby, it's clear that varying the frequency of an incident photon, the D band will shift its position, since the key wave vector directly depends on the incident photon energy. Okay, to the best of my knowledge, in the case presented here, the incident photon energy is constant, but the phonon vibration energy, or the wave vector key, is not. By applying a potential to the Operando Raman cell, we attract cations to the graphite surface. These cations are electrostatically adsorbed by the graphite layer, forming the electric double layer. Every ion adsorbed on the surface modifies the electric permissivity at the interface, continuously changing the electric field. Thus, cations locally alter the electric field and then alter the Fermi level. Imagine that, like classical semiconductor case, when occurs a slight variation on the electric field due to adsorbed cations on the carbon-based material with niobium surface, to conserve the number of particles and to fulfill the overall electrical charge neutrality, the Fermi level has to move away from the mid-gap position. This scenario is shown in figure 6b. Here, in this figure, in this slide, we can see that for different changes in the Fermi level, we will have different possibilities values for the wave vector key. So, the energy of the incident photon is the same because of the change in the Fermi level caused by adsorbed cations and thus changes the wave vector key. The energy of the output photon is changed because of this. Therefore, changing Raman shift of D band or Raman spectra. The inset of this figure shows three possibilities of this case. Okay, and how to explain the reversible and increasing D band shift? The electric field increases and the potential applied to the cell increases, as the amount of adsorbed cations depends on the potential applied, as expected. This phenomenon is represented in the figure 7. In figure 7a, we can see the double resonance process evidencing the Fermi energy in your energy mid-gap position. Figure 7b shows the process without cation nearby, and by figure 7c, consider the cation adsorbed on the carbon material surface. Here, we cannot clearly the change on the wave vector key. As we said before, for different values for wave vector key, we have different output photons, and therefore the reversible shift following the applied potential. In other words, the wave vector key varies according to the amount of adsorbed cations, and consequently, the output photon energy will change. Thus, the band shifts and then returns following the adsorption and adsorption of cations. Okay, but why do we use these electrodes in operando studies? Why not others? In our last published paper in an important journal of materials of energy storage, as I said before in the introduction of this presentation, we found excellent results for carbon-based materials decorated with niobium. Thus, we decided to carry out the operando studies to better understand these results. So, during controlled experiments, we investigated the influence of supercapacitor at different work potentials. So, the electrochemical performance of these carbon-based material decorated with niobium were evaluated at 1 volt and 1.8 volts in a symmetrical two-electrode cell at room temperature. The electrolyte used at this test was 1 molar of lithium sulfate in aqueous media. But first of all, in this slide, figure A shows voltammograms made up 1 volt and figure 1B shows voltammograms made up to 1.8 volts. In both cases, we use different scan rates such as 10, 50, 100, 500 and 1000 millivolts per second. In our case, we can observe a quasi-rectangular shape, which is expected for supercapacitor device, since the device current depends directly on an exponential given by this equation showed in this slide. In addition, this quasi-rectangular shape, even at high scan rates around 1000 millivolts, shows excellent capacitance retention and excellent power characteristics, since we can also observe a low equivalent series resistance. Besides that, it doesn't find any redox peaks, as you can see looking to these figures, indicating excellent electric double layer capacitive characteristics. Last, here we found a very high working potential of 1.8 volts, as you can see in figure 1b, and a specific capacitance value of 232 farads per gram, obtained at scan rate of 10 millivolts per second. These values are very promising for its use as an energy storage device. Okay, let's move on to the figure 2. Figure 2 shows the electrochemical impedance spectroscope, or in other words, the EAS. In this case, the analyses were made at 0.5 volts, applying a C signal of 10 millivolts amplitude for 10 millihertz to 10 kilohertz. For better understand the frequency responses, the data were normalized per gram and traded from method defined by the Delevi. Furthermore, this figure exhibits the data of before and after long-term tests, or after charge and discharge a lot of times. The inset of figure 2a shows details of the high frequency region, as you can see. Okay, and the cycle life of these carbon-based materials with niobium was investigated by doing 50,000 cycles of GCD at 50 amperes per gram and taking an EAS after. In other words, we took one charge and discharge. We charge and discharge our supercapacitors 50,000 cycles, and then after that we took an EAS test. Such investigation was done during 550,000 cycles for the 1 volt device, and during 200,000 cycles for the 1.8 volts capacitor. And after that, these capacitors crashed. To further elucidate the frequency responses, to better see the frequency responses, figure 2b exhibits the values of the parameters intrinsic to the Delevingne model obtained from the fitting simulation procedure using the CNLS method. To present data as function of the number of cycles. Okay. The rate performance of device with 1 volt and 1.8 volts were also evaluated by the galvanized type charge and discharge, or GCD. The GCD was carried out at 5 amperes per gram with different cell voltage from 1 to 2 volts, as seen in figure 3a. And no overcharge curve was observed until 1.8 volts. These curves show the better work voltage for supercapacitors. Besides that, the GCD result shows an increase in charging and discharging time with increasing the cell voltage, thus indicating the increases of capacitance of energy density. The performance of the device was also tested under various values of gravimetric currents, as you can see in figure 3b and c. With an increase of the gravimetric current from 0.5, 1, 5, 15, and 30 amperes per gram, the results indicated that both devices exhibit a typical symmetric triangular shape for supercapacitors, indicating nearly ideal capacitive behaviors. Furthermore, the GCD demonstrates that during different gravimetric currents of cycling, the Coulombic efficiency is above 90% for both potentials. In this case, the specific capacitance were calculated from the slopes of the GCD curves, and from the results obtained were calculated other relevant quantities as specific energy, specific power. Figure 3d summarizes and compares the different parameters obtained from GCD tests at 1 volt and at 1.8 volts. The specific capacitance as well as power and energy densities are a function of gravimetric current, as you can see looking to this picture. For one electrode, values of 112.45 farads per gram for 1 volt and 220.4 farads per gram for 1.8 volts. It's very good result. For energy and power, 2 electrodes were considered. In one hand, for device with 1 volt, these values were found to be 0.2 and 14 kilowatts per kilogram for specific power, and in the case of specific energy, we found 3.8 and 2.5 watt-hours per kilogram. In this case, we had used gravimetric current of 0.5 and 30 amperes per gram. On the other hand, in the device with 1.8 volts, these values were found to be 0.4 and 26.2 kilowatts per kilogram for specific power. And in the case of specific energy, we found 24.6 and 12.3 watt-hours per kilogram. Again, using 0.5 and 30 amperes per gram. And again, its results so good. It's very good for supercapacitors. Okay, lastly, if we look to these finds, the energy density of supercapacitor is proportional to the square of its voltage, as you know. To explore the practical application of these electrodes decorated with niobium, Electrochemical characterization were performed in a wide electrochemical window as I shown to you in this presentation. Such electrochemical window is from 1 to 1.8 volts and is shown in figure 3e through the Raman plot. As shown in Raman plot, the power and energy values of the presented device is situated in the superior right part of the graph, where it is indicated by a red frame rectangle. The position of this frame confirms that our device's power capacity is superior to that of the main power storage device, such as some batteries and some capacitors. So, lastly, in summary, such electrodes presented here have high stability in the aqueous medium, being able to study them through electrochemical technique. When tested in electrochemical cells, these materials showed high stability during 250,000 cycles of charge and discharge at a high potential window of 1.8 volts. It's worth mentioning that the literature usually refers the niobium-based electrodes up to 10,000 cycles, or supercapacitors is very higher cyclability. Besides high stability and cyclability, this device have high specific capacitance and high energy and power densities. And that's why we use these carbon-based materials decorated with niobium in Operando studies.